an example of one which is fascinating, which is radio advertising. I know we have people who are in the advertising business, both as producers and consumers of advertising. So why, when people are in their cars, why doesn't the car give you an ad that says, Eric, you need new pants. There's a pants store to the left. Right? No one's ever heard that ad, right? It makes sense. It literally makes sense, right? Because the car has a GPS, the radio knows where it is, right? The owner of the car is typically the driver, or maybe there's two people, or maybe it can be, you can make a generic, the family all need new pants, or whatever metaphor you want. But this is possible, and it's possible within the next year or two. Now, those ads are going to be much more targeted. So using the 20% as an example, it turns out that the set of radios that are coming out all have the ability to do various forms of digital targeting because they're ultimately digital computers of a specialized kind. Eventually, the same thing will be true of set-top boxes with your television. No one is suggesting we're going to take that old analog 13-channel black and white RCA television that you have in the basement and make that into a vibrant advertising device. But virtually everybody here in the room has some form of set-top box that's connected to your cable or your satellite television in your home or apartment here in the city. It's easy enough to know whose family, what street address, what neighborhood, the demographics of you, and so forth and so on. Those ads will convert an awful lot better than traditional broad advertising. And that's what we're doing. And those businesses are billion-dollar businesses.
And I've heard that you only like businesses that are billion-dollar businesses. Is that right?
Well, it's interesting that businesses start small, but in the internet, things grow very quickly. Another sort of thing you learn in the internet business is that the numbers are always in the hundreds of millions. So at Google, somebody will come in and say, well, we have 2 million users. And we'll go, oh, that's nothing. I'll go, do you have any idea how many 2 million is? But because there's so many people on the internet is now this very, very large collection of somewhat unmanaged activities. And in that sense, it's this tremendous new platform, right, for services, for businesses, and it will probably over time create a number of other businesses that are even larger than what Google represents as we build more and more infrastructure and more activities.
And most of the businesses you're talking about are advertising based, as would be right
Well, today they're advertising because it looks like advertising is the best way to reach the average person. The average person is not going to be a subscriber. In most countries, they're not required to pay. In Britain, for example, they have to pay for the BBC. But in general, the advertising models result in a free good for the end user, which they like. Targeted advertising makes sense that it would replace untargeted advertising in some cases. There are people in the room who know these numbers better than I, but the rough numbers are between $500 and $700 billion of worldwide advertising, roughly half in the United States, roughly half elsewhere. Of that, the online advertising, of which we represent, is 20 billion plus sort of industry size. So as more and more of the traditional advertising businesses become targeted, more and more of the advertising industry will be able to use our competitors' services. I also want to say I don't believe that the kind of targeted advertising I'm talking about will completely replace all of the other forms of advertising. I think the traditional branded advertising, which we all know and love, will continue. But even with branded advertising, it'll be possible to personalize it. So you can imagine, using the set-top box example that I was using earlier, you can imagine a branded ad, so driving a new car, they can put you in the car, right, and deliver that on your television set. So there's lots and lots of innovation that's now been possible because of the application of digital computing principles and the internet to what were these traditional broadcast and mechanisms. In magazines, you see a similar mechanism. We have been working with advertising partners to actually do targeted ads. Literally, for this block or this zip code or this distribution, we actually show a different set of ads than if you go somewhere else. They perform better than the untargeted ads.
For magazines.
For magazines. And I think that's very hopeful as well. A lot of magazines are having ad revenue problems as the model shifts. This is a potential opportunity for them. Newspapers, we believe, will be the same.
And you'll be involved in that, in the newspaper?
We already have a product that does the magazines, and we're now testing in these other areas. And the other part of our culture that's worth mentioning is we don't know the right answer in almost all of these cases, but we know how to test quickly. And one of the characteristics of these innovative businesses is you just have to keep testing, test, and eventually you find it. The first trials may not work, and so we have to find partners who want to work with us, and they understand we may screw it up.
Now, by your estimation, and I've seen some of the same advertising figures, so we're talking about internet accounting for maybe 3-4% of total advertising. Where will that be 5 years from now?
It'll be much larger. I don't think anybody knows the growth rates. The studies that I've seen indicate that the internet advertising is growing in absolute dollars fastest, and it's also taking share from some of the traditional. However, the definition of internet advertising is beginning to get a little squishy because, of course, many of the advertising that I was describing are really simply the internet is being applied to those advertising businesses. So they're not going away. They're just becoming more targeted.
All of the...
I'm sorry, may I?
Yeah.
Everybody here have a cell phone, right? By the way, when did that happen? What was the year when everyone you knew had a cell phone everywhere all the time, right? I don't remember, but it wasn't this year, right? So doesn't it make sense that advertising on your mobile phone should be a pretty big business? We just launched a big deal in Japan because who spends more time in the subway per unit of human computing in the world than the Japanese? 2 hours in the morning, 2 hours in the evening. What do? They look at our ads, right? That's got to be a good business. So there's a lot of reasons to think that these new targeted devices should be very lucrative from an advertising perspective. Explain
a little more about what happens in Japan. You're on your phone, you're going to Google on your telephone, is that?
Actually, more and more people are using the mobile devices, phones and others, to look up information. Mm-hmm. And the new paradigm is looking up information, seeing pictures, and watching short videos. And it's easy enough to marry either short video ads or text ads to that and make some money. And again, it's highly targeted because with the phone, you know the person, you know where the phone is, and in fact, in many cases, you know where they've been, and you can probably predict where they're going to.
And so how does this work in Japan?
Well, in fact, we show those ads. And we target them to where they are, and people see them, and so far they're converting well. So literally an advertiser says, I want to show my ads on somebody's computer as well as on their cell phone.
Mm-hmm. And it's targeted locally?
Targeted to the phone and to the user, and it's search-based in this case.
And how will this translate in the U.S.?
Well, to the degree that we can do these with mobile phone providers, we'll do it here in the U.S. The U.S., for folks here, I think most people know, is the laggard in the mobile phone world. And the Europeans and the Japanese, and it looks like the Chinese are ahead of the U.S. operators for lots of different reasons. So you're more likely to see this in Europe next.
And how long will it take to get to the U.S.?
It's over the next 12 months. The European trials are this summer. Mm-hmm. And it looks, again, like there's such penetration in Europe. And again, so much mobile phone use, and the customers are ready.